This video goes through the different modes of nutrition for A-level biology. Organisms have many different types of ways they can obtain nutrition to carry out their essential life processes. And there are two main modes that we're going to look at. This includes autotrophic, which means the organism can synthesize its own complex materials, i.e. can make their own food, and heterotrophic, which means they cannot make their own food, so often relies on obtaining the nutrition from other organisms. I'm going to give a high-level view of the different types of autotrophic and heterotrophic before I dive into more detail about how they are adapted to carry out their functions. So under autotrophic, we have photoautotrophic and chemoautotrophic. Under heterotrophic, we have saprotrophic, parasites, mutualism, and holozoic nutrition. Now I'm going to dive into each of them in more detail and give their adaptations to carry out their modes of nutrition. So under autotrophic, we start with photoautotrophic, and these use light energy to synthesize or make their own food. A key adaptation of them is that they have chlorophyll. Okay, so chlorophyll is required, and you can often see the green pigments within these different images shown. Examples of photoautotrophic include green plants, algae, phytoplankton, cyanobacteria. The next type of autotrophic is chemoautotrophic, and as the name suggests, they use chemicals. So inorganic chemicals such as hydrogen sulfide, ferrous iron, and ammonia to synthesize their own complex organic materials. These are found in extreme environments and often adapt to the different nutrient availabilities found in these different conditions. There are examples shown here, such as nitrogen-fixing bacteria or bacteria that lives in the stomach of the cow. We're now moving on from autotrophic to heterotrophic, and this is an example of a heterotrophic organism that relies on extracellular digestion. It's a fungi, so it's saprotrophic, and we're going to talk more about how their structure is adapted. So if we imagine a fungi growing on some bread, similar to the image that was just shown, they have these hyphae growing, which are those long sticks, and these grow out of the fungi, and they keep growing. On the edge of these are extracellular enzymes, so they grow from the tips of the fungi, and these are really important as they allow digestion to take place outside the body. So a key fact of the saprotrophic organisms is that digestion takes place extracellularly, okay? So once digestion has taken place extracellularly, you can see an example of enzymes and some substrate. The nutrients are then absorbed all over the hyphae back into the fungi, and that is how they absorb their nutrition. So a key adaptation for them is that they've got these hyphae growing and digestion takes place outside the body. If we move on to another heterotrophic type of nutrition, we have parasites. And this is an example of a tapeworm. And it's endo because it's inside the human body, inside the human intestine. And they have lots and lots of adaptations, mainly to prevent them being digested by humans. So they want to stay within the small intestine so they can help feed from the digestive food from humans. If we take a bit more of a look in detail about the structure of a parasite, specifically tapeworms, you can see that in the head, which is often called the solex, we have hooks and suckers. And these are embedded in the wall of the small intestine, and they prevent it from being dislodged by peristalsis. We also look at the body of the tapeworm, and this is made up of proglottids. The adult tapeworm is made up of these small segments, and they're about the same size as a grain of rice. They have a thick cuticle, and they secrete enzyme inhibitors and mucus. These are all to prevent it being digested by the human. If we now move on to look at the life cycle of parasite. So how does a parasite get into the human small intestine? So it starts by eggs being released into the environment as feces. A secondary host, such as a cow, eats this vegetation which is contaminated with this tapeworm. Eggs then hatch and larvae burrow through the gut wall and then are carried round the body, within the cow. All larvae mean, essentially, are these young parasites. So it's before they become the full parasite. The larvae then develop into cysts in the muscle, so in the muscle in the cow. And then humans become part of this life cycle. So humans eat this undercooked meat. And as a result of that, the tapeworm then become inside the human small intestine. And the first part of the tapeworm to develop is the solix, so the head, and it attaches to the walls of the intestine and it keeps growing. Adults can grow, so adult tapeworms can grow and survive for many years. The longest tapeworm was reported at 82 foot in 2018, so extremely long. We're now going to look at another example of a parasite, and it's ecto because it's outside the body. And this example is a head louse. So it's a bit of a simpler structure than the tapeworm, but essentially it feeds by sucking blood from the scalp of the host. And it has these claws which hold on to the hairs, and it lays eggs which are glued to the base of the hairs. It can easily transfer between the host by direct contact, as it cannot jump but only crawl. So another example of a parasite. If we move on, we're still in heterotrophic nutrition. We're going to move on to a holozoic. So holozoic, they digest food internally as opposed to saprotrophic, which is external. And this is an example of a single-celled amoeba. And it goes through these processes in the digestive process. So it starts with ingestion, so phagocytosis. The amoeba moves around the prey and closes the food vacuole, followed by digestion, which uses hydrolytic enzymes. Next is absorption, which is a process of diffusion of these digested food particles. And then assimilation. So assimilation means that the amoeba uses the food and gains energy that is required from the food. So it's the making the food useful, essentially. And then egestion. All the egested waste food is expelled. So that's kind of all the main types of nutrition you need to know about for this topic. So just to summarize, we've got autotrophic nutrition, which is photoautotrophic, which uses light energy. Different examples are plants, algae, cyanobacteria. The key adaptation is chlorophyll, chloroplast present. The second is chemoautotrophic, which uses chemical energy. And the key adaptations are they're often extremophiles, and they're very adapted to these extreme conditions of the environment, so can survive at really high temperatures. In terms of heterotrophic, we have saprotrophic, which uses extracellular digestion. And examples of these are fungi, which we looked at. They have many adaptations for this, but the key one is they have hyphae growing, in which they secrete these extracellular enzymes from them. Holozoic, which is the opposite of saprotrophic, in that it involves internal digestion of food. And the one we looked at was the amoeba. Then we have parasites. So they essentially obtain nourishment, often at the expense of the host, and they usually cause harm to the host. We looked at the tapeworm, and they have lots of adaptations, such as the head, the hook, the suckers, the proglottids. And we looked at the life cycle of a tapeworm, so how it gets into the human small intestine. The head louse was another parasite we looked at. And then finally, mutualism. We didn't actually go into this in too much detail, but this is essentially where many organisms live on other organisms in a relationship that provides benefit to both. And the key word is benefit here.